Greetings, and thank you very much for the invitation to come and say a few words at this important peace and unity gathering today. In both Canadian and international law, human rights, democracy, and the rule of law are interrelated and mutually reinforcing. These three elements are highly relevant to the ongoing situation faced by the Wet'suwet'en Nation. When we reflect on peace and unity, we can look to the human rights standards affirmed in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, or TRC. Article 7 of the UN Declaration affirms the collective right of Indigenous peoples to live in freedom, peace, and security as distinct peoples. When read together with other provisions of the Declaration, the term security includes environmental security, territorial security, human security, and food security. Article 29 of the UN Declaration is also clear. Indigenous peoples have the right to the conservation and protection of the environment and the productive capacity of their lands or territories and resources. The UN Declaration is now entrenched in both federal and BC legislation and must be fully respected and implemented. Further, the TRC's call to action number 92 is very clear. We call upon the corporate sector in Canada to adopt the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as a reconciliation framework and to apply its principles, norms, and standards to corporate policy and core operational activities involving Indigenous peoples and their lands and resources. In this whole context, it is worth noting that every state in the world has reaffirmed by consensus well over 100 times the United Nations resolution entitled Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This crucial resolution affirms we are determined to foster peaceful, just, and inclusive societies which are free from fear and violence. There can be no sustainable development without peace, and no peace without sustainable development. I repeat, there can be no sustainable development without peace, and no peace without sustainable development.
Okay, everyone, I'm very pleased to join you. In its December 2021 report, the Environmental Assessment Office of the BC government elaborated on numerous violations by Coastal GasLink in project areas that the office inspected. To achieve long-lasting peace and security, it is important for Coastal GasLink to fully respect the laws, rights, and concerns of the Wet'suwet'en people. These include environmental and other ongoing concerns relating to the activities of Coastal GasLink in or affecting the traditional territory of the Wet'suwet'en. In particular, Coastal GasLink continues to violate its environmental management plan by allowing sediment and contaminants from the project to flow into rivers and streams. These violations are inconsistent with sustainable development. Land defenders are not criminals and must not be treated as such by the RCMP. The current impasse can only be resolved through good faith, respectful dialogue, and upholding the inherent rights of Indigenous peoples. As British Columbia and Canada work towards decolonization, the old models must be left behind. Governments, law enforcement, the justice system, and corporate entities must all consider the ongoing legacy of colonization and focus on respect for Indigenous peoples and their human rights. In his July 2014 report to the General Assembly entitled Strengthening and Coordinating United Nations Rule of Law Activities, the UN Secretary General emphasized, and I quote, "In order for the rule of law to further sustainable development outcomes, it must ensure protection for all human rights, including economic, social, and cultural rights, and the right to development. While rule by law may provide a legal framework and contractual certainty, it is only the rule of law consistent with international human rights which can provide for development that is inclusive and sustainable. The government of British Columbia, together with Indigenous peoples and their representative organizations, are leading the way in Canada in ensuring that provincial laws are enacted or amended to fully implement the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The Wet'suwet'en Nation and its leaders must not be discriminated against. Their human rights and jurisdiction must be fully respected, consistent with the UN Declaration and other international human rights law. To use the phrase in the UN Declaration, and I quote, sustainable and equitable development, unquote, in Wet'suwet'en territory requires no less. Thank you.
Thank you.